Hey YouTubers, Rob here with a demo on Dev Diary. First Dev Diary entry for the game I'm currently working on, Pivotus. You can sort of see the tile screen up now. I'm only just running this in development mode in Unity's editor. I'm just going to walk through what the game is, sort of my influences in working on it, what my goals of it are, and just cover some things like what I'm planning to release it on, tools I'm using to build it, and the current things I'm working on with regard to the game. I want this to sort of be a small series that I'm putting out over the next few weeks as I build the game, hopefully to just draw more interest in it. So I'm just going to start, I'm going to have a quick start of the game, and I'm going to talk about what sort of my goals are. Essentially, I'm a big fan of these old-style arcade shooter experiences. You know, the sort of the early days of arcade gaming before you had the whole sort of rise of multiple credits. Yeah, I guess the example of that kind of gameplay was Gauntlet, which is a really fun game, but it lacks a lot when you're having to continuously feed the machine money because of the energy system. I much prefer these games where you're given 3 lives, you're given a fairly solid scoring system, and you just go for the score challenge. As a developer, I don't feel confident enough to want to work on a really large project, especially now as I'm sort of a little limited in terms of my own resources. And I'm not a big fan of alpha funding or running a Kickstarter when I don't think I have the fan base. So you can sort of see, looking at the game, you can sort of see it's got that flat sort of 3D look. I'm quite a big fan of that visually, and doing the whole game art myself means it's actually feasible to generate some low polygon geometry and use those for items in the game. So the basic idea is it's a 360-degree rotational shmup, if you will, or like shooting game. And you as the player are set in the center of the screen, that yellow triangular object. And the idea is you just need to rotate around and blast the enemies. There's still a lot of systems that aren't really. I want to go emphasize a sort of comboing system. You can sort of see the shielding system there, which is activated as you pop, as you cease firing. I kind of like the little animations that are hooked up with it as well to sort of emphasize that. And you've got your enemy wave patterns flying through the stage. This stage of the build, there are only 3 levels, and I'm going to be working on more. I actually want a lot more when I actually finish the game. You can see some other effects there that, prior to the waves appearing, you can see a helper object show the paths. The intent of that is to sort of like warn the player of where they'll be coming from. If you've ever played Galaga Legions, you'll see how well that actually works as a technique. But yeah, so the original idea is, I actually had this idea for this sort of fixed position shooter a long time ago. It was actually when I was starting to teach myself the XNA stack, which was Microsoft's stack that you could write games for Windows PCs, the Xbox 360, and as well as eventually Windows Phone. That was sort of the platform where I kind of finally clicked enough to be able to do development work, because I'm not much of a graphics programmer. And I sort of had the idea, and I left it, and I sort of put it behind when I sort of tried some other stuff. And what essentially happened, so earlier in the year, back in April, it was not long after I'd released my first game, Pocket Dogfights, and I was sort of a little bored, and when the Ludum Dare competition came up, that's run 3 times a year, April, August, and December. It's a 48-hour solo game programming contest. The theme was minimalism, and along with some friends, worked on a game to release for the contest. And what essentially that was actually a much simplified version of this. For a lot of reasons, I didn't quite have the original idea I wanted to get done in time, so I focused on another idea, which was the proto version of this. I'll actually include a link to the original version of the game below, so you can actually check it out. You can sort of see where it was and where it's going. I got a lot of feedback from people that, like, there's some feedback, sort of the classic disparaging, negative, generic feedback, but some people were like, you could actually do something with this. It's fun, for a little rush, and you could sort of build it out. And so I started building it out pretty much shortly after I sort of conditioned it alongside some Pocket Dogfights updates, but found it didn't really click in terms of the fun. So when the October Challenge came about, the idea of the October Challenge is, again, it's sort of organised by the team behind Ludendare. You basically take a game you're working on or write a game, publish it in October, and try to make at least $1 of sales. It's sort of that inspiration to actually finish something. And I've actually been fighting a little bit of inspiration black hole lately. I've sort of written some pieces about that, just fighting a lot of the difficulties in being noticed and things like that. So I sort of decided to dust this off and really start working on it in the month. And I mean, already from the first week, it's actually, I didn't get to spend a full week on it as I was busy with some other aspects, but from the things I've been working on the last few days, actually the gameplay has improved quite a bit. I mean, what I found was when I rewrote the system that manages the wave spawning, the game became a lot more fun. And then adding these shields in, and actually giving the whole game some colour instead of the sort of monochromeness, also seems to help. So, I mean, visually, as sort of pointed out, it came from that look of the early vector games, Asteroids, and whatnot. I'm also a fan, in terms of gameplay, of games like those being worked on by Jeff Minter. So if you play Tempest 2000, in particular, it's sort of that wave pattern in terms of how those waves are built. You sort of have to face a set of enemies and then you progress. And I mean, I'm a fan of that style, that Twitch gameplay. So that's sort of what I'm aiming for with this game. Again, and a lot of the artistic style and audio style is really just a reflection of the fact that I'm trying to do it all solo, simply just for budgetary. I missed the speech sample. Simply compared to budgetary reasons. So, I mean, that's sort of introduction. In terms of tooling, I mean, the big one is I'm using Unity. I use Unity pretty successfully with Pocket Dogfights. I tend to sometimes describe myself as having a bit of a love-hate relationship with Unity. There's a lot of things I love about it, but there's a lot of frustrations I have. Really, in particular, a lot of those stem around just not supporting the most recent Macs properly. So, whereas if I were to make an iOS build and stick it on an iPad, high-end iPad, it looks utterly amazing. But that same build on the Mac I'm recording this on, not so much. Doesn't support the high definition Retina displays, for want of the classic buzzword. In terms of my mesh work, there's an actual rather cool editor extension for Unity in the asset store called Flying Text, and that's how I've generated the text here that you can see on the title screen. Which is rather nice to use. You give it a true type font, you can set some properties, and it generates everything you need. There are a couple other extensions I'm using. The wave patterns are used by I was recommended one called Superspline Pro, and that's a case of you actually just draw nodes and it computes the paths. And I may cover that in a future installment if people are interested in hearing about how I'm doing these aspects of development. All the other meshes, like you saw for the player, the bullets, the shields, those are all generated. I use Cheetah 3D, which is a Mac-only modeling package. Compared to a lot of other packages out there, it's not free like Blender. I think it's about 150 Australian, $150 that is. But it sort of fits into the Mac workflow a lot more. And I'm a fairly big fan of apps that fit into that standard workflow in terms of just, especially when you get into groups with something complex like 3D modeling, something flows really well. I also tend to use a lot of 2D, in terms of doing 2D stuff, which I haven't done much of here, but there'll be some UI stuff I may do to support that. I'm a big fan of Acorn, which again is a Mac-specific 2D graphics bitmap editor. It sort of fits into that Mac workflow really well. I'm not a big fan of Photoshop in terms of using it. It does way too many things for what I need, and it's also really expensive, and I honestly can't justify that expense right now. In the past, when I've been doing jobs for other people, I've tended to have licensed copies of Photoshop provided on work computers. For my independent stuff, I tend to work solo mostly, so I use a workflow I'm happy with. I also use a package called Opacity, which is a vector drawing package. And again, same sort of thing. It does everything I need to do. It's a lot cheaper than Illustrator. It's a lot less complex than Illustrator, and it feels like a proper Mac app, which is something I think is important. The sound effects are generally done with a version of SFXR. For any indie dev out there, SFXR is basically gold. It's a little tool, originally Flash-based. It wasn't originally Flash-based. There's a whole bunch of versions out there because it was open source. But the idea is you set a bunch of parameters and it can just generate your various tones. And the speech clip that you didn't hear, I actually emulated with the trusty SAM on the C64, which is a text-to-speech application that is well known for that. It was sort of that classic. I kind of like that last feel. I could have used the tools that built into OS X, but they don't produce as robotic a tone, which I really feel fits with the vibe of the game. So that's all the tools. The next thing is platforms. So my last game, of course, Pocket Dog Fights, got released on 5 platforms in the end. iOS, Android, Windows PC, Mac, and Linux. Based on the sales stats, iOS was the most popular platform for that game, and Android coming up a fair way behind, but kind of slowly approaching. The desktop versions didn't really gain traction. So, I mean, I should be releasing iOS first, Android second. Man, as I'm trying to do this game for the October challenge for Ludum Dare, I don't think it's worth compromising a lot of time for App Store approval. I mean, I always tend to, when I've been doing iOS development for people, I've always budgeted 2 weeks. So, for 2 weeks, I usually say, expect 2 weeks for an approval, even for an update. And that pretty much means I'd have to submit this week. And the game's nowhere near ready to be submitted this week, let's just say that. So this time around, I am going to go PC Mac first. I think Linux is just a case of not being able to test it thoroughly here, but also I don't know anyone who's using it. The player base I have seems to be pretty much like I've gotten interest from iOS, Android, PC, Mac. So it's going to be PC Mac first. Mac App Store will follow a little later. Just simply, I'd like to put Game Center support in, and and there's always approval times. iOS and Android will probably follow after that. Definitely iOS. Android, I'm still umming and ahhing about. One of the biggest problems that I had when developing Pocket Dog Fights is simply the fact that I really didn't gain traction with press. Even though I've met a few writers and journalists, they're never enough to really get the kind of articles that would get downloads of the game. So, and while I've met some people since launching, I haven't really met anyone in the Android space that I know personally, that I know enough that I can say, here's the build presented in detail. So Android's still a maybe, and I think if I put a lot more focus on the desktop support, maybe people will check it out there. I'll certainly be interested to hear what people think about that. I don't really want to get to the situation I did last time where we're building, and what I mean by last time is with Pocket Dog Fights, when I went to do an update and release it on those 5 platforms, it actually took quite a bit of work, and I really would like to sort of streamline that this time round. Which is why I think, at the very least, PC, Mac, iOS. But again, please let me know below if you think I'm insane if you really want to see it somewhere. As I said, part of it is that I really need to find the right people to talk to get the message out there. It's one of the things I really want to do better with this game. So currently, so I just had the little demo. I'll dive into another demo. The basic architecture is in place. I've got the levels loading. It's actually a rather cool system on how I do that. I've got the player input working. I've got collisions working, and you can actually have a game. There's scoring. There's lives. There's a few systems I still need to work on. For instance, there's no real front end. I only just have that static screen. a lot of that is leftovers from what I put together when I did the original Ludum Dare game. And it's something I want to work on now. Now I'm not restricted by the need to have open source code. So I can use commercial libraries. Yeah, the UI here is handled with the ever so powerful NGUI. Well, by the UI, really, I just mean that score. And there's some other code I have that was derived from Pocket Dogfights. Pocket Dogfights code for handling, like, doing the live rotation. I use GoTween for the tweens that handle the popping of the shield, and also the popping of the player when the player is destroyed, amongst other bits and pieces. So there's enough in, like as I said, you can have a basic game, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. One of the things I need to do is really work on a comboing system. I think a game like this lives or dies on a comboing system that gives you a challenge in how, in being able to score efficiently. The other thing is there's a lot of levels that need to design. So that's what I'll be working on. Truth of the matter is, these patterns were some early ones I sort of put together, and they really need to be engineered to fit right, to flow right, and to be playable by the player. I'm not quite happy with what I have at the moment, so playing around, sketching patterns that feel great on screen and will be a challenge to engage the player and be interesting visually is something that I have to work on. I mean, obviously there needs to be more enemies. Having a single enemy type's a bit limiting after a while, so I'd like to work on that as well. And as well, there's UI, there's high scores, and there's a lot of other systems that need to go in. So there's a lot to be done. So it is and I won't deny that it is a bit of a challenge. And so this is the build. This is a build that is slightly newer than what I originally worked on. I originally uploaded to the Feedback Friday on Reddit. So one of the things I'm trying to sort of sync up alpha builds with that, so I can get some feedback from that community as well as my own. I think, again, I've not been so great in reaching out and getting in touch with other communities and see what they think. And the accelerated timeline that I need to be part of to get this game out the door is always going to be interesting, so to speak. As for this week, I'm going to be working on a lot of the waves. I want to try and have a bigger selection of them for when I start getting the game together, getting waves that people seem to be a little more interested in. I also have a few bugs that you might be able to see, just some of the spawning bugs not quite working as well as I'd like, and I'd like to do some work on fixing those, making things not happen that shouldn't be happening. But also the input. One of the big pieces of feedback I got from that build that I put out for Feedback Friday was that people really wanted to be able to use the mouse. I mean, I'm just playing with the current key setup's the left, right arrow key and the space bar, but people really want to be able to use the mouse, and I think that's going to be kind of a setup that I think will act the way Pocket Dogfights works, is where the mouse is based relative to the player in the center of the screen, and moving the mouse around will just point the player from a vector from the center of the screen to where the mouse is. It's something I'm going to be working on this week, see how it works, and putting some builds out. More enemies. I've actually got one enemy in mind that I want to work on, a sort of mine, and the idea is you'll get to later stages, and these mines there'll be like a chance to spawn a mine and a sort of spawning interval. So the idea is that a mine will be launched, will come in from somewhere outside the playfield, seek towards the player, and you'll need to shoot it down before it gets you. I think it'll sort of distract you from the other enemies in the scene. You sort of need to have that pressure to take it out. I think that pressure is a rather good thing to deal with. But yeah, a lot of it will be thinking out some other enemies, playing around with modelling some enemies in Cheetah, just sitting down and actually getting some look for some other enemies. I mean, I'd love to try get things set up for boss waves, for a boss wave at some point, but that might be next week instead of this week. But the biggest thing would be input, and I'd like to actually start getting some bits and pieces happening on a menu system, and start making things a little more animated, a little more juicy. To use the term, if you've seen the juicing video, I'm actually linked to that as well. So making the UI feel a little more alive than it does now. So I guess the next thing that leads on to is, for you, the audience watching this, how can you play the builds? So I'm going to mainly post these builds through Reddit. I will may start doing it on my dev blog, and on Twitter, which I'll cover all that next. So they're all built for the purpose of development. I'm just using the Unity browser builds. It's a lot more convenient in terms of just being able to say, go to this URL, don't worry about installing the game, just run it. It's a different story for the release, but for now, I think that's just a lot more compact and a lot less red tape. It was one thing I found a lot when developing Pocket Dogfights, was that there was sort of that fatigue with issuing lots of builds through TestFlight for iOS, so it was easy to just say, here's the browser build, play. So I'm trying to sort of do that to get more feedback, which is something I kind of crave in terms of like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Things like that. I will have the current build that I published a few days ago in the video notes, so you can check that out. And again, feedback is always craved. So I think the last thing to really cover for now is just, how do you keep up with development? First off, I'm going to try and do these videos every week. So if you subscribe to the channel, you'll see them hopefully amongst the other things I do here, some retro gaming videos, but I will try to get these here, and you'll be able to keep those updates. You can follow me, like I have a so you can follow my personal account on Twitter, or you can follow the Pivotus game account. I'll link those. That's at Pivotus for the game, and my personal one, I'll follow that. And you can also, if you have a Tumblr account, I'm publishing the dev blog on Tumblr just to simplify the process a bit. So if you go to www.pivotusgame.com, again, all these will be below. You can follow that, and you'll see more screens as they come there. So there's a few sources I'll be posting data. I'll be posting updates. I'll be posting screens and content and things. And it's also something I like, as I post things, to get feedback on all of those kind of things. I'm lucky that I can focus on this full time for the next few weeks, which would be a good challenge. So that's pretty much this is pretty much the first dev video done now. First time I've ever tried to do a dev video. I'm not quite used to the idea of open development, so to speak. So this is all new for me to try and do this. So I'd love to hear your feedback. Is there anything you want me to cover? Like, should I show how I'm putting waves together, or generating objects, or things like that? Is that something you'd like to see? I guess that's sort of what I'm most interested in hearing. Like, please, leave some feedback, some comments below, and tell me what you'd like to see up in future videos. I do try to consider everything if I may not respond to everything. That's pretty much that. So thanks if you're still here now. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for hearing everything. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what thoughts are. And I'm hoping that I'm able to produce a little arcade experience that you'll enjoy in a few weeks. It's Rob signing out.